So Carol, you have done significant work in SDG space. As technical expert to SDG impact at UNDP, it'll be interesting to hear your views and make a presentation. I want to invite you to do that. And can I ask Rasika and the technical team to please put up her PowerPoint presentation?
Next slide, thank you. And these are all available on the IIRC's website, integratedreporting.org. And I'm just going to go through some key points of those. Next slide, please. This diagram comes from the IIRC framework, and it's adapted in one of those publications I showed you to show that as an organization is transforming the capitals through its business models, it's making an impact on contribution to the SDGs. And the idea is that an organization should be thinking about sustainable development risks and opportunities in everything it does. So right through the business model, the development of strategy, the allocation of resources, and the design of the outputs, the products or services of the organization. And if it doesn't do that, it's not going to have the capitals available to continue with its business model in the long term. And we can see a direct impact there on natural capital and social capital. And I think this really needs to be explicit, this thinking about sustainable development risks and opportunities through everything an organization does. Next slide, please. Now, this is a diagram that comes from the Sustainable Development Goal Disclosure Recommendations, the SDGD recommendations, and they draw on the three most used frameworks and standards for reporting: the IR framework, the GRI standards, and the TCFD recommendations. Bringing them together and thinking of a few more dimensions provides an organization with a good way of thinking about the SDGs and then disclosing. And as the diagram depicts, strategy must be right in the center, right at the heart. If we don't transform organizational strategies to take account of sustainable development risks and opportunities, we will not meet the SDGs and we will not continue to create value in the longer term. And around the outside there, we have depicted the governance theme with governance oversight around all of the other elements. And as Zumi said, that is absolutely critical to driving change, getting this in the boardroom and getting it, all of these elements to the attention of the board. Next slide, please. There are some fundamental concepts in the SDGD disclosure recommendations. And I really want to sort of emphasize the achievement of the SDGs is absolutely critical to creating value in the long term for society and also for providers of finance. And so the materiality concept there it talks about decision making and the positive and negative impacts of the organization on global achievement of the SDGs, and also thinking about the ability of the organization to create long-term value for society. We must move away from just thinking about financial materiality or economic value creation, because that then gets us stuck in a short-term loop, not thinking of broader implications which are relevant longer term. Next slide, please. These are the SDG impact standards. The private equity standards will be released very soon. The bonds are going out for another round of consultation, and the SDG impact standards for enterprises will be out for consultation in October. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So the standards are they're based on high-level principles. They're designed to change the thinking and approach within organizations. So they're about what an organization does, and they are linked to various existing impact management tools. And you'll see the diagram there of the themes in the impact standards is the same as the one that we used in the SDG disclosure recommendations, with strategy right at the center and governance oversight throughout the whole process. Next slide, please. Now, the various standards here are interconnected, and the orange arrows are meant to show that they're designed to encourage continual improvement of this whole process, and the interaction between the various standards facilitates that continuous improvement in an organization. Next slide, please. Now, this slide is a report on some research I've done lately with my colleague Subhash Abhay, and we looked at disclosures on pandemic risk and climate change risk in organizations that have been significantly affected by both just before the COVID-19 outbreak. So we looked at the world's largest 10 airlines, the 5 largest cruise companies, and 5 largest hotel companies. And we looked at everything we could find, sustainability reports, annual reports, 10Ks, 20Fs, and CDP data where it was available. And despite looking through all that data, only 6 of these organizations referred to pandemic risk, and only 4 included mitigation strategies. And the slide there shows the climate change risk reporting. In purple, you can see the physical risks of climate change that were reported. Only 15% of these very large, high-impact companies disclosed risks connected with accessing natural resources in the future and travel destinations becoming unattractive or inaccessible due to climate change. Only 15% recorded those, and that is clearly unacceptable in these very large, high-impact companies. That's why I think, the integrated reporting framework needs to be very explicit in talking about sustainable development risks and opportunities. And that, to me, is where the sustainable development goals are relevant to business. They represent a world global consensus on the sustainable development risks that affect people and planet, and therefore they're an incredibly useful guide for organizations. And there are, of course, interdependencies between them. So thinking about reporting in 4 pillars as the WEF and the Big 4 are doing is not necessarily particularly helpful in my view. Focusing on just metrics rather than what the organization is doing and within and the decision-making processes going on is not going to create the transformation that's really needed to shift business towards making a contribution to the SDGs. Next slide, please. And so this slide just draws on and highlights the bits of these various frameworks which are particularly relevant to thinking about the SDGs and what we need to do to achieve the SDGs. So an organization reporting on any one of these frameworks is well ahead in terms of being able to implement the SDG recommendations, and reporting on all 3, of course, and makes it much more straightforward again. And these are the bits of these various frameworks that we have taken and incorporated into the SDG recommendations. Thank you, Mahendra.
So thanks, Carol. That was quite, I particularly am impressed with the extensive research that you have done, particularly that, studying these several sustainability reports and the integrated reports of the companies, and very few of them really mention about pandemic risks and how to mitigate it. I think that's something which Mervyn, we have picked up from here, and we need to build it into our framework going forward.
Or indeed climate change risk.
Oh, yes. And I think your concept of materiality should be broader, beyond the financial materiality, taking into account. But we are moving there on ESG materiality. So thank you with that.